Welcome and thank you for standing by. Your lines have been placed on a listen-only mode until the question and answer session. At that time, if you would like to ask a question, you may press star 1. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. And now I'll turn the call over to Clint Hastings. You may begin, sir.
Thank you, Shirley. Thanks, everyone, for joining. This is a very exciting day. Our first webinar on the content of the CDFI Rapid Response Program, or RRP application. We had our pre-application webinar about a week and a half ago. We had tremendous turnout, a lot of questions that we weren't able to answer at the time just due to the timing of the release of our NOFA and funding application materials, but hopefully we're able to answer a lot of the questions that you had back then and maybe even more that you've got right now about the CDFI RRP program. As Shirley, our operator, said, my name is Clint Hastings. I'm an Associate Program Manager for Native Initiatives here at the CDFI Fund, and I'm joined today by several of my colleagues. Amber Bell, our Program Manager, will be here answering our questions. I'm also joined by Elizabeth Hoffman and Janet Cope, two of our Senior Portfolio Managers at the CDFI and NACA program, who will be helping me with the presentation today. The first thing I want to show, in case you haven't navigated to our RRP website yet, is just how to navigate there. If you're familiar with our website, this is the front page, the home page of cdfifund.gov. If you navigate up to Programs and Training, and then go down to Programs, and click on CDFI Rapid Response Program in a similar manner as to how you'd access the CDFI Program or Native Initiatives page. You will click there, and we have a pretty straightforward and simple website set up with the CDFI RRP application timeline, the webinar schedule. You'll see the first one right here listed. We've got another webinar scheduled in a week. We'll do a little bit less presenting next week and a little bit more answering of the Q&A. To that point, hopefully you've had the opportunity to submit your SF424 and launch a application in AMOS and kind of work through the process, and hopefully at that point be close to submitting. But if you've got some kind of not last minute questions, but some questions remaining about how to complete the application, we do have another event scheduled in a week. And then down at the bottom of the page, we've got a series of 9 documents that should help you navigate the process of launching and completing an RRP application, from the NOFA to an AMOS training manual that will allow you to step-by-step navigate the RRP application. And because this is a new kind of one-time program that we've designed to be very straightforward and reduce burden on applicants, we wanted to take the opportunity at the start of this webinar to do something a little bit different and just show you what the RRP application looks like, where you're going to want to launch it from, so on and so forth. So right now, most of you should be familiar with this view. This is the view that you'll see as you log in as an AMOS user. I'm logged in one of our test applications or test organizations right now. I'm going to scroll down to the Program Profile section of the organization profile, and I'm going to click on the CDFI NACA program profile. So this is the same program profile that you'd use to launch your CDFI program or NACA program application. And then I've already done it for just to make sure that things go smoothly today. I've already launched the application, but down near the bottom of the page where you normally launch your FA or TA application for CDFI or NACA, we have a new button this year that you click on that says New CDFI RRP Application. That's what you'll click on to launch your application. I've already done that. So in an instance where you've already logged in, created your application, and you've saved it, decided to come back later and complete the rest of the application or more of the application, you'll see a list of all of your previously created or submitted applications and then your active applications. because I've already created an RRP application, down here at the bottom of this list, you'll see the CDFI Rapid Response Program application. I'm not going to click the title under application type. That'll take you to a page that's not of a lot of use to you at this point. But I'm going to click over here on the left where you see the application dash and then a series of numbers. When I click that, it's going to launch you into our template application homepage. For those of you who have launched or submitted a CDFI or NACA program application in the past, or an application for one of our other programs at the CDFI Fund in the past couple of funding rounds, this should look very familiar to you. And along those lines, this application in general should look very familiar to the CDFI program and NACA program applications that you looked at in the past couple of years. This is essentially a pared down version of the CDFI program and NACA program financial assistance application. You'll be familiar with the applicant level information. This is very straightforward, basic information where you're confirming information about your organization, the name, DUNS, address, EIN, information along those lines. You'll be confirming some contact information. You'll be answering some environmental review questions that are very straightforward, exactly the same that you'd be familiar with in the CDFI or NACA program application. You'll be submitting a CDFI Rapid Response Program request amount, which again is very similar to the request page in the CDFI program or NACA program application. This does operate a little bit differently. We'll get into this a little bit more here in a moment, but essentially you are going to complete this page, confirm the information once you submit your application financial data, because your total award request amount is linked to the amount of financial products that you've closed in an eligible market or target market in your most recent historic fiscal year, which you will complete and fill in a subsequent section of the application, your application financial data. Again, this page should look very familiar to you. One thing that's going to be a little bit different in the RRP application versus the CDFI program or NACA program application is that you're only completing 3 years of historic financial data and your current year of financial data. In the CDFI and NACA programs, you're going to be completing 3 years of projected financial data. We are not utilizing projected financial data in the RRP program, so therefore we're not collecting it. But again, this information or this page should look very familiar to you. Essentially, your maximum award request is going to be based upon the sum of 3 fields on this section of the application. It's going to be calculated upon the total amount of your on-balance sheet loans closed in an eligible market and or target market in your most recent historic fiscal year. So that field right there, plus the on-balance sheet loan guarantees made in an eligible market and or target market in your most recent historic year, and the total equity investments closed in an eligible market and or target market in your most recent historic fiscal year. Now, that does not mean you only need to complete these 3 fields of application financial data. Please complete these every field on this page accurately and consistently with your financial data, because we do utilize all the sections that we're collecting here, but those are going to be the 3 that ultimately link back to your total application request amount, which we'll get into again a little bit later in our formal presentation, but it will be calculated down here, the sum of those 3 fields down here on the bottom of this page. And Your CDFI RRP request amount may not exceed 150% of your organization's financial products closed in an eligible market or target market in the most recent historic fiscal year, or $200,000, whichever of those two values is greater. And again, we'll get into that a little bit more in our formal presentation. And the last thing that I want to show to you in the application is the compliance evaluation questions. Again, this is consistent with the CDFI program and NACA program application. These are a series of about 20 questions, compliance evaluation questions, that we ask organizations to complete and answer both in their CDFI program and NACA program application, and now the CDFI RRP application. And this will be used to calculate your compliance evaluation risk score, which is outlined in the CDFI RRP evaluation process document. So again, this is a very straightforward application, should look very familiar to you. And we really just wanted to give you a high-level look at how this application is put together and the type of information that we'll be requesting you to complete and submit as part of the Rapid Response Program, just so all of our organizations get a comfortability with the level of effort that they'll need to undertake over the next couple of years, and then also hopefully give you a sense of the relative, I don't want to say simplicity, but how straightforward the application is. It's a little bit different than the CDFI program and NAC application, where we're asking you to submit responses to narrative questions. There are no narrative questions in this application. So hopefully you'll find this a process that requires a little bit less effort as you're going through the process of hopefully completing and submitting an RRP application and a CDFI program and NACA program or NACA program application. So if you've got questions about this application and how it looks, please feel free to ask them at the end of our presentation during the Q&A portion. But from here, I'm going to move into our formal presentation. And again, my name is Clint Hastings. I'm an Associate Program Manager here at the CDFI Fund. And I'll be joined by Elizabeth and Janet throughout this presentation, two of my colleagues here at the CDFI and NACA program. And from there, this is just a quick agenda of the items that we'll be covering today. But a couple of things we won't be covering today are instructions on how to enter data into an application in AMIS, or questions about the CDFI and NACA program, financial assistance or technical assistance open applications. We've got a series of webinars that are already scheduled that you can join to answer questions or ask questions about FA and TA. So if you're here looking for your answers to questions about FA and TA in the CDFI NACA program, we'd love to answer those, just not today. Submit a service request or join us in one of our future webinars. A little bit about the CDFI Fund. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, but for those of you who are maybe interested in RRP and kind of engaging with us for one of the first times, our mission is to expand economic opportunity for underserved people and communities by supporting the growth and capacity of a national network of community development lenders, investors, and financial service providers. And our vision is an America in which all people and communities have access to the investment capital and financial services that they need to prosper. And as I've alluded to throughout our initial portion of this webinar, we've got other programs that we administer here at the CDFI Fund, the CDFI program and NACA program, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. We've also got the BEA program, the New Markets Tax Credit Program, the CDFI Bond Guarantee Program, the Capital Magnet Fund. One of our new programs, or actually a couple of our new programs, the Small Dollar Loan Program, the Economic Mobility Corps, and the CDFI Rapid Response Program, which we're talking about today. So a little bit more about the CDFI Rapid Response Program. So back in December of last year, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 provided $1.25 billion in supplemental appropriations for the CDFI fund to provide grants to CDFIs to support, prepare for, and respond to the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And in addition to this, Congress required that a minimum of $25 million must be awarded to benefit Native communities. The CDFI RRP is designed to quickly deploy this capital to certified CDFIs through a streamlined application and review process to provide certified CDFIs with resources to help counter the economic impacts of COVID-19 in distressed and underserved communities. As hopefully you grasped or understood based on our quick demo of the RRP application in AMOS, in order to meet our expedited award deadlines required by Congress, the CDFI Fund is utilizing and leveraging its existing CDFI certification and CDFI program FA and TA application evaluation processes, in addition to its existing IT infrastructure, in order to quickly collect applications and evaluate them. The CDFI RRP implements statutory language to make awards using a formula approach that takes into account criteria such as certification status, financial and compliance performance, portfolio and balance sheet strength, and the diversity of CDFI business model types and program capacity. It creates an award program that's designed to provide awards to the majority of applicants. Per the CDFI RRP NOFA, we expect to award an estimated 1,000 awards with an average award size of $1.2 million. And as I've said a few times now, we expect this application to be familiar to CDFIs that applied for the CDFI or NACA programs in the past, and we're collecting a subset of the information required in our FA and TA applications. And we've done this in order to reduce burden to applicants. We know you've got a lot going on right now. In addition to RRP, you may be interested in applying for CDFI program, NACA program, and other programs outside of the CDFI fund that allow you to respond to COVID-19. So, high-level overview of eligibility for RRP. Organizations, in order to be eligible to apply, must be a certified CDFI as of the date the NOFA was published in the Federal Register, which was February 26th, last Friday. Holding companies and bank subsidiaries can apply for awards, but not both. If both apply, the bank subsidiary will be deemed ineligible and will evaluate the application of the holding company. Something that is new for the RRP program that is a little bit different than the CDFI program and the NACA program is that for our regulated institutions with a CRA, Community Reinvestment Act assessment, they must have an assessment rating of satisfactory or better. If the rating is below satisfactory on its most recent examination, they will not be eligible for a RRP award. Next, all organizations must have a minimum financial health and safety score of at least 4. So for our regulated institutions, this means you must have a CAMEL or CAMEL score of at least 4, and for our unregulated organizations, you must score an AAT financial score of at least 4. And how that score is calculated is detailed in the RRP application guidance materials. And again, there are additional criteria or eligibility requirements that are detailed in both the NOFA and our RRP application material. This, again, should be familiar to most of you. Certified CDFI is an organization that the CDFI Fund has officially notified that it meets all CDFI certification requirements. And certified CDFIs can fall within a variety of categories of financial institution types, including loan funds, credit unions, both federally and state insured, banks and depository institution holding companies, and venture capital funds. And again, as I said a couple of slides ago, organizations, in order to be eligible to apply for RRP, are required to have been certified as of February 26th. So, as I noted earlier, Congress placed a requirement on the CDFI fund to ensure that at least $25 million of the total RRP appropriations are awarded to or allocated to benefit Native communities. So what does that mean? In order to qualify as a CDFI that serves Native communities, you will be required to demonstrate and attest to the fact that 50% or more of your past activities are directed to Native communities, and that your certification target market has at least one of the following characteristics. Number one, you must demonstrate that the investment area approved for certification is also a geographic area of a federally designated reservation, Hawaiian homeland, Alaska Native village, or U.S. Census Bureau designated tribal statistic area. Or you must demonstrate that your targeted population target market is Native American, Alaska Natives living in Alaska, or Native Hawaiians living in Hawaii. And for purposes of this NOFA applicable to the CDFI RRP, a Native community is defined as Native American, Alaska Native, or Native Hawaiian populations or Native American areas defined as federally designated reservations, Hawaiian homelands, Alaska Native villages, or U.S. Census Bureau designated tribal statistical areas. One thing that is a little bit different between the RRP program and the CDFI program is that all awards will be in the form of a grant, which also means that no matching funds are required for this program. So again, no loans, no equity investments, only grants in the RRP. The minimum award amount is $200,000 and the maximum award amount is $5 million, although we do not anticipate making awards that high. We do not expect, even though organizations are allowed to request up to a maximum of $5 million, we do not expect to make awards of $5 million. And beyond the minimum and maximum of $200,000 and $5 million, organizations can only request awards of up to 150% of their total financial products closed in an eligible market and or target market for its most recent historic fiscal year, or the minimum award amount of $200,000, whichever is greater. And we'll get, again, we'll touch a little bit more on how that total financial products closed in an eligible market and or target market is calculated a little bit later in the presentation. Next, applicants without financial statements may not request more than $200,000. So if you do not have, if your organization does not have audited financial statements, you are allowed to request an award. However, it may not be more than $200,000. And we have had a question or two come in this week about our regulated financial institutions, our banks and credit unions that are not required to provide us with audited financial statements. This cap is not applicable to our regulated financial institutions, and we plan on clarifying that rule in a subsequent edition of our frequently asked questions that should be posted to our website in the next few days. Organizations do not have to request more than the minimum award amount of $200,000, even if they qualify for a larger request amount. So again, if you're allowed to request $5 million, but you're not comfortable as an organization with the fact that you might not be able to deploy that amount within the period of performance, you don't have to request the maximum amount you're eligible to request. And as I just kind of alluded to, all applicants that receive an award must deploy the full award amount during the period of performance. And organizations that choose to request more than the minimum award amount will have a PG&M that requires them to close a certain amount of financial products within the period of performance, depending on their total amount awarded. Next, the eligible activity categories should be familiar to those of you who have applied for a CDFI program or NACA program award in the past and or received one. The full array of financial assistance and technical assistance eligible activity categories are applicable to the RRP program. We do have some more nuanced rules. So an organization can expend the total amount of the award on eligible activity categories supporting the provisions of financial products and services. So financial products, financial services, loan loss reserves, development services, and capital reserves for our regulated institutions. But they can also spend a portion of the award on the eligible activity categories supporting operations. And those are compensation for personal services, fringe benefits, professional service costs, travel costs, training and education costs, equipment, and supplies. However, there is a limitation on that. An organization can only expend the greater of $200,000 or 15% of the total grant on the 7 categories supporting operations. And I won't go over every eligible line of business, but the eligible line of businesses that can be, eligible lines of business that can be supported with an RRP award are analogous to the eligible lines of business that can be supported by CDFI program and NACA program FA awards. Okay, up next, the RRP awards are going to have a 2-year period of performance with annual reporting on uses of funds and progress towards performance benchmarks. And the reporting will include information that will enable the CDFI fund to track the impact of the award. So all recipients will be required to expend the funds by the end of the period of performance on eligible activities. So for those of you that have received FA awards in the past couple of years or TA awards, you'll be familiar with the PG&M that requires you to expend 90% of your initial payment within the first year of the period of performance and the total amount of the award by the end of the period of performance. A PG&M that is exactly the same will apply to your RRP award, so that should not be something that is too difficult for you to understand. Again, 90% of the initial payment within the first year of the period of performance, and the full amount of the period of performance must be expended, the full amount of the award must be expended by the end of the period of performance. So if you receive a minimum award amount, that's the only PG&M that you'll have, just to expend the award in one of the eligible activity categories. For those organizations that receive an award larger than the minimum request, there will be an additional PG&M that requires you to expend at 50%, not expend, I apologize, let me correct that, that requires you to deploy financial products in an eligible market or target market in an amount equivalent to 50% of your total RRP award within the first year of the period of performance, and deploy or close financial products in an eligible market and or approved target market in the amount of in an amount that's equivalent to 70% of your total RRP award by the end of the period of performance. And for our organizations that are native CDFIs, you'll have to meet those same 50% and 70% thresholds within a native community. And similar to our CDFI program FA awards, organizations are going to be allowed to meet those financial products closed performance goals and measures using either the RRP award or other funds available on their balance sheet. That gives you a very high-level overview of the CDFI RRP application. From here, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Elizabeth Hoffman, to talk to you about preparing your application.
Thanks so much, Clint. So as we frame the application process, we think of it basically as a three-part process. First, the pre-application. We held a webinar on this topic on February 18th, which is available, a recording of that, on the website Clint navigated us to at the beginning, cdfifund.gov/RRP. The slides from that presentation, as well as this presentation, are on that same website. But we're going to go over just a few of the pre-application pieces now before getting into the application components and submission and review process. The critical deadlines that applicants should be aware of are on the screen as follows. They're all during the week of March 22nd, so mark your calendars for a couple of weeks from now. Applicants are required to enter your EIN and DUNS numbers in your AMIS account by the March 22nd deadline. That is also the last day to submit the SF-424 mandatory form within the grants.gov system. The next day, March 23rd at 5 p.m., is the last day to contact the CDFI Fund with questions about the program and the application. And 2 days later, on March 25th, is the last day to contact the AMIS IT help desk at 5 p.m. with any technical AMIS problems. And March 25th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time is the last possible moment to submit your CDFI RRP application within AMIS. So hopefully you have seen this slide from our previous webinar and have already taken these steps to get started of reading the NOFA, registering or updating your accounts. There's 3 systems that you'll need to be in: SAM.gov, grants.gov, and AMIS. The materials are now all on the website for you to download and familiarize yourself with. And note that due to the short application period, it is unlikely that an applicant without an existing SAM.gov account would be able to register for SAM.gov, a new account on the site, and still meet the application deadline. I'd like to give a few reminders on the EIN and DUNS numbers. Applicants should ensure the accuracy and uniformity of these numbers across your SAM.gov and AMIS accounts. It's how we link the 2 forms. The CDFI Fund will reject an application that's submitted with the EIN or DUNS of a parent or affiliate organization. So please make sure that you are logged into your correct AMIS account for the organization that is applying for RRP and using that DUNS number. Additionally, the DUNS numbers must match, and the CDFI Fund reserves the right to reject an application if the EIN and DUNS numbers do not match in between AMIS and SAM.gov. With that, I will turn it over to my colleague Janet for the next section.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So in this section, I will provide a high-level overview of the application components and the required attachments. So the application guidance that's posted on our website goes into detail of exactly what information to include. So this table here shows the 3 main categories required to be completed by all applicants in order to submit an RRP application. So this will look very familiar to those who have already participated in previous CDFI funding rounds. The first category is some general and administration information for your organization. So this includes information such as applicants' contact details and its CDFI designation. All applicants will also need to include some organization-specific data and charts, and that's outlined in the application guidance material. So this would include information such as applicants' request amount for the RRP award. And the last category here is the organization's financial data for the past 3 historic fiscal years, as well as the current fiscal year. Next, I will go over some of the required attachments to include with your application. So all unregulated institutions, such as loan funds, capital venture funds, and others, must attach audited financial statements for the 3 most recent historic fiscal years. Please note here that the financial statements should be for the CDFI applicant itself, meaning that if the applicant's financial statements are consolidated with other entities, then you must either attach the unconsolidated versions of them or indicate to us where we can find that information in the statements. Unregulated institutions must also attach a management letter for the applicant's most recent historic fiscal year. More information on this letter can be found on Table 5 of the RRP Notice of Funding Availability, or the NOFR. If a management letter is not available, then you must submit a statement in lieu of a management letter using a template that's provided in AMIS, which is our application platform. And if your organization doesn't have audited financial statements, as Clint mentioned earlier, then go ahead and attach your unaudited financial statements for the 3 most recent historic fiscal years. And finally, unregulated financial institutions must also attach to your current year-to-date financial statements. And with that, I will turn it back to Elizabeth to walk us through the application review process.
Thanks, Janet. So a quick reminder that there's the 2-step submission process. Step 1, on or before March 22nd, you need to submit your SF-424 via grants.gov and enter your EIN and DUNS numbers in AMIS. I'd like to pause for just a moment and remind folks that since we do have the CDFI program and NACA program funding opportunities available at the same time, those have different funding opportunity numbers than the RRP. When you are submitting an SF-424 within grants.gov, you need to submit one SF-424 for each program that you're applying to. So if you are applying to more than one of our programs, please make sure that you apply, that you submit SF-424s for each. And if you're applying for just RRP, please make sure that you do select the right code. It's CDFI-2021-RRP. Secondly, then, the applicant must submit a complete CDFI RRP application in AMIS, including all the required application documents on or before March 25th. I'm now going to speak a bit about our evaluation review process. This is detailed in a document about the evaluation review. I believe it is the 4th resource on the website, and it's a 4-step process. The first is our eligibility review, where we ensure that applicants meet all the requirements detailed in the NOFA, Table 4. The second step has 2 components, financial analysis and also compliance risk evaluation. For the financial analysis evaluation, the CDFI fund evaluates our unregulated applicants using a tool we've developed called the Application Assessment Tool, or AAT, which uses financial information provided in the application to generate a score that ranges from 1 through 5. If the unregulated applicant receives a score of 1, 2, 3, or 4, they will move on to step 3 of our evaluation process. If an unregulated applicant receives a score of 5, that will be reviewed and confirmed by CDFI fund staff. Applicants that receive a total financial score of 5 will not advance to step 3. For our regulated institutions, there will be a comparable process, but it will be based upon regulator feedback and the CAMEL score or equivalent. Similarly, applicants must have a CAMEL rating of at least 4 and or no significant material concerns from their regulator to advance. In step 2, all applicants, regulated and unregulated, will also receive a compliance risk evaluation. There is an AAT tool within AMIS for this as well. It will look at the applicant's reporting history on any prior CDFI program or NACA program awards, reporting capacity, and performance risk with respect to their future PG&Ms. On the compliance risk evaluation, it's again a 5-point score. Applicants that score 1, 2, or 3 automatically move on to step 3. And for compliance, if an applicant scores a 4 or a 5, those will be reviewed and confirmed by the CDFI fund staff. So if an applicant is still deemed a high compliance risk after the reviews, then the applicant will not advance to step 3. Step 3 is our final award decision. In this step, the CDFI fund staff will conduct a due diligence review to ensure adherence with the CDFI Fund's policies and procedures, as well as applicable federal regulations. Some of the items we will analyze include programmatic risk factors, including but not limited to financial stability, the history of performance in managing federal awards, any audit or regulator findings, and the ability to effectively implement federal requirements. If an applicant is found to be a significant risk as a result of this due diligence review, the CDFI Fund may either eliminate the applicant from consideration for a grant or may reduce the applicant's award amount. The final step, step 4, for all applicants that are recommended is the award amount determination. The CDFI Fund will be using a formula-based approach. Factors that will be considered include an applicant's requested amount, the deployment track record, the minimum award size in the NOFA, the total funding availability, our appropriation was $1.25 billion, submission of audited financial statements, overall amount targeted to Native communities, and the due diligence review in step 3. Some additional provisions, as Clint spoke about, the award is going to be capped at either 150% of the dollar volume of an applicant's total on-balance sheet financial products closed in eligible markets and or target markets for its most recent historic fiscal year, or the minimum award size of $200,000, whichever is greater. Finally, per the legislation, a minimum of $25 million of the total CDFI RRP funds awarded are allocated to benefit Native communities. So in thinking sort of through what this is going to look like, the biggest factor in determining what the award sizes will be will depend on the total awards made, which depends on our total applicants. The formula approach will result essentially in 3 groups. The first group would be CDFIs that request or receive that minimum award amount of just $200,000. Again, that is an option for any CDFI who wishes to just request the minimum, and then that would not have a corresponding lending-based PG&M, or that would be smaller groups limited to requesting that minimum amount. I'm going to skip for a second to the third group. This will be the CDFIs receiving the largest possible award amount, which we're estimating. I'll show you some estimates in the next few slides, but around, for example, $1.35 million. And then the group between those two is going to be a group that's limited either by the total financial products being closed, that 150% amount, so that would result in them not being able to receive an award of the largest amount, but larger than the minimum. So award sizes in this second group will vary between $200,000 and the largest amount received. So here's the award size projection. For example, the CDFI Fund projects making 1,050 awards. We've done some analysis of our certified CDFIs, and based on that, we predict that if we were to be able to make 1,050 awards, about 82 CDFI recipients, or 8% of all of our certified CDFIs, would be in that bucket of the minimum award size of $200,000. Another 179 certified CDFIs, or about 17%, would have their award size vary, but between the minimum and the maximum. And then the largest award, all the remainder of the 789 certified CDFIs, or about 75% of the certified CDFIs would receive the largest award. They would all receive the same amount. The remaining money would be divvied up, and that would be for an award size in that group of $1.35 million. As we mentioned, the sizes are really going to depend on how many groups apply and therefore how many awards are made. This is an alternate example showing with 800 awards with a smaller number of CDFIs in each group. Essentially what happens is that largest award size increases. So in a scenario as this, if we only had and received 800 awards, if we only received applications such that we could make about 800 awards, based on our projections of the data, about 73% of the CDFIs would fall in that group getting the largest award, and split evenly, that would be about $1.83 million. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Clint.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I'm going to cover a few items at the end of our agenda here, uses of award, reporting, and some important reminders as you consider applying for an RRP award. So first up, uses of award. As I discussed earlier, applicants are only allowed to use a CDFI RRP award for an eligible activity category, and those uses of awards must occur in the eligible lines of business listed there on the screen. These are analogous to the eligible lines of business for the CDFI program and NACA program, so they should look familiar to most of you on the webinar. Again, as I alluded to earlier or discussed earlier, there are 5 eligible activity categories supporting the provision of financial products and services, all of which must occur in an eligible market and/or an applicant's approved target market, and they are financial products, financial services, loan loss reserves, development services, and capital reserves. And it's important to note that only regulated institutions are eligible to utilize an award or authorized to use an award for financial services or capital reserves. There are also 7 eligible or authorized activity categories supporting operations in which an organization may expend the greater of $200,000 or 15% of their total RRP award in support of, and those are compensation, personal services, compensation fringe benefits, professional service costs, travel costs, training and education costs, equipment, and supplies. This is an important reminder that the only organizations that are allowed to pass through, transfer, or co-award funds are depository institution holding companies in which they can deploy an award through a bank subsidiary, but no other organizations are allowed to transfer the award or deploy a portion of the award through any other organizations other than that which applies for the award and receives the award without the prior written consent of the CDFI fund. So let's talk about your PG&Ms that you'll be held to if you receive an RRP award. Each organization must request an initial payment amount in AMIS that it reasonably expects to expend within the first 12 months after the award announcement. That will make up a portion of one of your performance goals and measures. You'll be required to expend at least 90% of the initial payment amount for an authorized activity in an eligible market and or an approved target market within year 1 of the period of performance, and 100% of the award must be expended for one of those authorized activity categories in an eligible market or target market by the end of the period of performance. For organizations that request and receive more than the minimum award amount, you will be required to satisfy a lending-based performance goal and measure. Your organization will be required to close financial products in an eligible market and or target market in the equivalent of 50% of the award amount by the end of year 1 of the period of performance and 70% of the award amount by the end of the period of performance. As I discussed earlier, organizations that apply to serve Native communities must close financial products in Native communities in the equivalent of the respective percentages above. So those 50% and 70% benchmarks. This is very important for those of you that have received supplemental awards to your CDFI or NACA program, Financial Assistance Program awards in the past. You'll probably be familiar with this. But transaction dollars used to satisfy RRP PG&Ms may not be double counted towards CDFI program or NACA program FA lending-based PG&Ms. So the bulk of those are base FA PG&Ms. And that's similar to how our supplemental awards and FA will work, in which you cannot double count a transaction close to support a PPC award for one of your base FA performance goals and measures. There will be a 2-year period of performance, which begins with the date of the award announcement and includes 2 full consecutive years after the date of the award announcement. So everybody's period of performance will actually be longer than 2 years after the award announcement date. This works in a fashion similar to the FA and TA awards in CDFI NACA. And you'll have reporting requirements that are similar to the CDFI program and NACA program awards. Organizations will be required to submit transaction level reports, uses of award reports, performance progress reports, financial statement audit reports if applicable, and single audit reports if applicable. Additionally, reporting requirements may be added or modified in order to enable the Secretary of the Treasury to conduct a study of the CDFI RRP program's impact. Again, Elizabeth went over these deadlines, but they're so important. We want to make sure every organization interested and eligible to apply for RRP gets in and satisfies these deadlines, so I'm going to go over them again. The last day to enter your EIN and DUNS number in AMIS is March 22nd at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. You've also got to submit your SF-424 mandatory on March 22nd. We've got a couple of interim deadlines in which organizations are allowed to ask questions about the program. That's on the 23rd by 5 p.m. and ask questions or request IT assistance by the 25th of March at 5 p.m. And finally, organizations are required to submit their RRP application in AMIS by March 25th at 11:59 Eastern. So on the screen, I've got some contact information. You'll see our email addresses for AMIS IT support, programmatic support, compliance support. But one thing that I really want to reiterate, the easiest and the most efficient way to contact and interact with us is through a service request that you can submit via your organization's AMIS account. We really highly encourage everyone to reach out to us initially through an AMIS service request. That allows our leadership to track the inquiries and the questions that we get from organizations and make sure that we are responding in a timely manner and providing sufficient quality of customer service. For organizations that need support around grants.gov or SAM.gov, I do want to mention that we do not support those accounts here at the CDFI Fund. You'll need to reach out directly to grants.gov at the email address or the phone number on the screen. We cannot provide technical support on grants.gov. And similarly, for SAM.gov, you'll need to reach out to the Federal Service Desk at fsd.gov or call the phone number there on the screen. Finally, if you want to access the application materials, navigate to that website that I showed at the start of the presentation. We've got a new address set up for the RRP. That's cdfifund.gov/RRP, and you'll find all of the application materials that are applicable to this program for your download. And please note that we do intend on updating the frequently asked questions document several times over the course of the next few weeks. We'll probably do that a little bit more frequently than we do for the CDFI program and NACA programs, just because the open application period for this program is a little bit shorter, 30 days. The deadline to submit, again, is March 25th. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. At this point, I'm going to ask Shirley, our operator, to open it up for Q&A. You all do have the option to submit questions via the chat box, the platform that you're using online. but honestly, we prefer for you to ask your questions over the phone because it's just a little bit easier for us to track and respond to and include on our recording of the webinar that we post to our website. So if other organizations that review the recording in the future have the same question, they'll be able to hear your question and hear our response to it. So please, if you have the capability to, ask your question over the phone.
Thank you. We will now begin our question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question, please press star 1, unmute your line, and record your name clearly. Again, that is star 1 to ask a question. And one moment, please, for our first question.
Thank you so much, team, for that great presentation. This is Amber Kuhar Bell. I am the program manager for the CDFI Native Initiatives Program, and now the CDFI RRP. And so, one of the things that I just really wanted to highlight from this presentation is hopefully your takeaway is that this application and this process was really designed so anybody who doesn't have familiarity with the CDFI fund process would able to submit any application in a streamlined, easy manner without, assistance from external consultants or external support. We understand that, there's a lot of things coming at you and you may need that help. But the real intention of this was to be a very streamlined application that, that as you saw, that the vast majority, we anticipate that the vast majority of applicants will get awards, and that the evaluation process that Elizabeth, talked about is that you have to meet the eligibility criteria, and then after that, it's really about ensuring minimum financial safety and soundness, minimum compliance risk, and the due diligence review. And so, again, we anticipate the vast majority of applicants receiving awards. And at that, I will hopefully we have some questions in the queue.
And we do have some questions. Our first one comes from Don Rife. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Hello to all. Again, Amber, it absolutely comes across in that manner, so thank you. I did put my questions in the chat, but since Clint requested them, I'm calling. So in the Verify Financial Institution category, it seems like bank or holding company wide, that's not populating in AMIS. And it's in the organization page, it's in the initial applicant section, but in that financial data portion, the Verify Financial Institution category is blank for all of our bank or bank holding company clients. And it's not for.
Have you submitted a service request?
I have.
Okay,
but
we will make sure
keeping
follow up on that.
Yeah, it's keeping everything else from, populating in that area.
We hadn't seen that service request come through yet, so we will make sure to tag it. And Don, you spell your last name. Right, can you confirm that, because we can look at it up from your
REI to S as in Frank.
Great. We will follow up on that and get back to you shortly.
Okay. Then the other thing is the statement in lieu.
That you mentioned, the regulated institutions, and Clint mentioned this, but anytime we talk about audited financials and attaching audited financials and anything that would limit an award about an audited financial, that's only if you're requested and required to submit those. So those are venture capital funds and loan funds. Anybody who is a regulated entity that is not required to submit audited financials, then it just doesn't apply. Just to really push that, drive that home.
Okay. So then also the statement in lieu of letter, two things. Usually the template is provided, in FA. For both FA and this RRP, it's taking you to the auditor sample letter of what a management letter actually looks like. Are you providing the template for that? Because right now it's pointing to a sample letter of what it looks like versus the opinion letter.
Hi, this is Elizabeth.
Andrew.
Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
Hi. Yeah, so this year it's new for both the FA and the RRP application. The questions that are prompted for groups, again, it's not going to be required based on the institution type that, you know, if you're a regulated institution, so the audit management letter sequence that is in EMIS is intended to replace the need to write your own statement in lieu. It takes you through a series of questions and provides you, like, based on responses to a series of questions, it includes all the data that we need attested to. Certainly, if you do have a statement, if you have a management letter that's issued by your auditor that makes, you know, meets the requirements of the letter, there's an option to select that, and then you upload your management letter. And so the link is just pointing you to sort of what a management letter looks like, because often what we've had in the past, and it's just not, you know, it doesn't meet the requirements, often groups are just attaching their opinion letter from their audit. That is not the management letter. And so we've provided that as a courtesy in years past, but we've still gotten opinion letters rather than management letters. So rest assured, the sequence that is set up in both the RRP application and the FA TA application will guide you through the process based on your responses to questions so that you can submit the correct information, and it makes the review process, it allows your application to meet the requirements.
Yes, totally have that, but the actual template that you want for that statement is not being provided this year, and in the past it had been. So has it changed, or?
So the template, that's what I was trying to share. Sorry, I'm not being clear. The questions that we're asking you to attest to, you know, were there any findings? All of the attributes that were in that, we called it an exemplar or a sample management letter. All of those conditions, there were like 3 paragraphs that we were asking you to attest to in years past. All of those are part of the sequence of questions now that are done on screen inside the EMIS application. Okay. And so it guides you through that process.
Attachment. So you don't have an attachment this year. You're simply checking that part in there? Is that?
Correct. So yeah, for example, like last year what we would get is like a group might attest to one of those paragraphs but then leave the other 2 out, and that was not acceptable. That didn't meet the requirements. And so what we've done is like sort of forced the applicant into attesting to the 3, you know, those 4 areas within EMIS, and then we don't have to worry about people, you know, omitting a key paragraph.
Okay. Then that answers why there's nowhere to attach it as well. So, excellent. Okay.
Yeah, every year we try to improve customer service, and this is an attempt to do that. So we've built in that process into EMIS.
Yes, absolutely, hands down. I think that was, we thought we still needed it as an attachment. So, not to worry. That's the end of mine.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Ben Sones. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Hello. Thank you guys for the call today. Quick question regarding eligible activities, and this in part springs from the fact that we haven't physically opened some of the applications yet. Does the application itself call for us to commit to which eligible activity we will be using for our use of award in advance, or are we merely required to devote the funds to an eligible activity, to one or more eligible activity after the fact?
No, you do not need to commit in advance. The applications work very similarly to how the FA and TA applications work. In essence, you need to, expend the entire amount of the award in an eligible activity with no more than $200,000 or 15%, whichever is greater, in one of those categories supporting operations. But this is not an instance in which organizations need to say we are expending $50,000 in this category, $500,000 in that category and $200,000 in category Y. Just so long as they're in an eligible activity or an authorized activity, and you're satisfying the $200,000/15% requirement, an organization is good to go.
Good. One more question, if I could.
Sure.
Regarding the guidance about the DUNS and EIN matching between SAM.gov and AMIS, we have two clients with recent name changes, and they are processing with different timing. With AMIS, that change is able to be made fairly quickly. In SAM, it's a little more slow because of the IRS lag time in processing name changes. As long as the DUN and EIN match between the SF-424 and AMIS, will that all tie in appropriately, or will a difference in name based on a recent legal name change potentially make a problem with the application?
Hi, this is Elizabeth. I can answer that. As long as the DUNS number and EIN number matches, there will not be a problem with recent name changes. We do have some applicants that change their names around this time every year. We have received 2 service requests off the top of my head from organizations in the process of a name change. I'm not sure if either of those is your client. Within AMIS, there is, the material events form and the AMIS pieces that have to go through, but we understand that, SAM.gov is a little backlogged in processing their name changes. So as long as the DUNS remains the same, there would be no problem regarding a name change.
Wonderful. Thank you, Elizabeth. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Our next question comes from John York. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Hey, yes. So we are an unregulated loan fund that became certified as a CDFI a few weeks ago, and we've never had our financial statements audited before. So we have it scheduled to be done within the application timeline. But a few questions on that. One, can our audited, so for what is able to be accepted, is it okay if we use a cash basis for those audited financial statements?
Yeah, this is Amber. So I want to parse your question in a couple parts. Is the CDFI fund does not tell you what kind of audits you need to do. That's not our role. We're not regulators, especially for loan funds.
Yep.
We just care that they have been audited from an external source in order to receive more than the minimum award amount. So I think the important part that I think that you fall into a unique category is we need audited financial statements for you to receive more than the minimum. If by the next, by the 25th they're not done, then you will, fall into the category of $200,000.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's very clear. That's why we're trying to get this done.
The other thing is you can also apply for technical assistance. I think that's something that, was alluded to in this program is that RRP and CDFI and NACA program, financial and technical assistance awards are not mutually exclusive. We have a lot of money. We'd like to give it away. And so you also are eligible to apply for FA and or TA, depending on your the size of your organization.
Okay, great. I think that answers my questions then.
Thank you. Our next question comes from John Markowski. Your line is open. You may ask a question.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for presenting this and providing information today. I think this question might be first for Clint. I think you were giving the illustrations of kind of how to spend the money and when to spend the money. I wonder if you could give a specific illustration. If you receive we're using $1 million as an example, and let's just say if there was a $1 million award, would it be, so first for the thing I will categorize as kind of operations or admin costs, there was that 15% $200,000. And so I think it would be $200,000 would be for that, possibly. And then if you had the rest of it, then there was something about 70% of the whole award had to be for financial services, financial products. And so that would be $700,000 if you had to do that. then what are the, if what I said is right, that leaves $100,000 unaccounted for. What could potentially be that money? Is that for financial products also, or could that be used for something else? And then also, I know you said it, but I'd like to hear it again. The timing of the requirement. I think you said 50% in the 50% in the first year and 70% overall for financial products, and then there was a 90 and a 100%. Could you just clarify how all that works, and using $1 million as the example?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Maybe Amber and I will kind of tag team this one. This is actually a question not too long ago that I asked Amber to clarify for myself. So Amber, please feel free to chime in and supplement my answer. Given the $1 million example, you would be able to utilize $200,000 of the award for those operational categories because the rule is $200,000 or 15% of the total award, whichever is greater. The 90% and the 90% of the initial payment and the 100% of the total award are related to expenditure of the actual RRP award. So you've got to expend 90% of the initial payment request in an authorized activity category within the first year of the period of performance. So let's say you received $1 million award, and in your application you say, we expect to expend $500,000 of that award within the first year of the period of performance within the next 12 months. And, so $500,000 is your initial payment. So that means within the first year of the period of performance, your organization would be required to expend 90% of that total amount of $450,000 in one of those eligible activities. And then by the end of the period of performance, your organization would be required to expend 100% of the total amount of the award in an authorized activity category, and of course in an eligible market or target market. That's for both portions of this PG&M. By the end of the period of performance. The second part of your question related to financial products is a little bit different. It's not directly tied to expenditure of the award. You can satisfy the second PG&M that requires 50% of the total award, 50% of your award amount to be closed in financial products in an eligible market or target market within the first year of the period of performance. So that doesn't mean you actually have to expend the award closing financial products. You can use it, you can use other capital on your balance sheet to satisfy that PG&M. And then by the end of the period of performance, you've got to close at least an amount equivalent to 70% of the total award amount in financial products in an eligible market or target market. And so the expenditure of the award and the closing of financial products are not directly tied to one another. And so just as an example, even though, you're asking kind of like what happens at other 10%, they're not directly tied to one another. For example, you could use a portion of your award on on development services. That's not going to be something that shows up as satisfying that financial product portion of your PG&Ms, but it is an eligible use of the award that you could utilize to satisfy the PG&M related to expenditure. And I'll turn it over to Amber to maybe clarify some of what I said.
Yeah, Clint, I think you did a great job. I just give another example that I find useful is that, we get, as CDFIs, get a lot of money from, say, CRA investment or a bank investor, and it's a loan. But, we all need loan loss reserve because every time we make a loan, we need to reserve for it. So this $1 million could go straight to loan loss reserve, 100% of it. And as soon as you put it in your loan loss reserves, it's considered expended. and you have satisfied your PG&M 1. However, you haven't made any loans yet or closed any loans or financial products. And so you'll do that with that loan that you got from the bank. And so every dollar you lend from the bank or in loans closed, that will count towards meeting that second PG&M. So the thing about the RRP awards and the CDFI FA awards is we're balance sheet investors. We're really trying to build the organization. And so this capital goes onto your balance sheet, and then it's leveraging other private sources of capital, for example.
Okay. Thank you. Can I ask one more thing? I'm sorry. Thank you. That's a very clear answer on all of that. On one thing about consolidated financial statements and audits, we have something called an affiliate, but we have a consolidated financial statement and a consolidated audit. The affiliate actually, all the finances run through our central organization, through the lead organization. Do you need to disaggregate those in some? I mean, and the affiliate actually is complementary to the lending activity. Do we really need to disaggregate those, or can we just put in submit the consolidated audit?
You cannot submit. You can attach the consolidated audit, but the information that goes into the financials can only be from the CDFI itself. So you in the guidance, and a team member can help me out on this, but you also need to have somewhere where we can see your the breakout of the CDFI, who's applying. And this is largely because while your affiliate may be doing wonderful things, you can't transfer the money to them. And you can't count the activity on their balance sheet as you don't report that in the transaction level report, which is one of the reports that you'll be required to submit as part of the RRP. So really, we're trying to keep the lanes clean and the lines clean of that money. So that is why you can only put the financial activities of the CDFI applying. I mean, now the other point is that a number of CDFIs may have CDFI affiliates, and those CDFI affiliates are also eligible for the CDFI for RRP. And so say they have, clearly the bank and bank holding companies, we talked about that, but say there's 3 affiliated CDFIs, they're all loan funds, and all these 3 affiliated loan funds have their own certification number, their own EIN number, and their own DUNS number, and their own SAM.gov account, and all of those things, and their own entities. They could theoretically get 3 RRP awards because there are 3 distinct entities.
Yeah. And not to belabor this, but was a subsidiary, is that different than an affiliate? Or?
They're synonymous in our minds.
They're what?
I mean, they have different definitions, but we treat them the same, subsidiaries and affiliates.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Kim LaFranchi. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Thank you. I have a question regarding the year 1 payment. Assuming that the maximum amount that I would apply for might get reduced down when the actual awards happen, how do you adjust, or do you adjust the year 1 payment? Do you do it on a pro rata basis, or do you come back to us prior to distribution and ask us to reset?
We don't reduce it. So whatever you put in there is your first payment. So say you applied for a $5 million award and you said you can do $1 million in the next 12 months, but you actually get a $1 million award, then your first payment and your total award size would be the same.
Really? Okay. Wow.
If you, however, get your assistance agreement and you're like, things changed, we can't expend that, you can always request to modify your award. But if, for example, you put in that you applied for $5 million and your first payment was going to be $5 million, and you got $1 million award, then you would reduce it down to $1 million. Because you can't receive in a payment more than your award size.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Helen Scalia. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Good afternoon. Thank you, CDFI Fund, for designing an inclusive and streamlined application process. I have two questions. The first is, can you confirm that the RRP will not count toward a CDFI's 3-year, $5 million cap?
Yes, I can confirm that. It is not in the legislation, therefore it is not included in the 3-year, $5 million cap. For anybody who doesn't know, that is a requirement, restriction of the CDFI and NACA program in the Regal Act.
Okay, thank you. And then second, given the high likelihood of an RRP award, should or how should FA applicants treat an RRP award request in their financial projections, both their revenues and expenses and with their loan projections?
So I think you're specifically asking, let me just clarify that if you are applying for both an RRP and a CDFI and NACA financial or technical assistance award, there is an FAQ section on the RRP website that specifically has a section talking about considerations for CDFI and NACA financial technical assistance. So I want you to really read those four FAQs. They go into deep examples with pictures and waterfalls. The other thing that you should know in general is the treatment of which is we think of it as a supplemental award. So if, for example, a CDFI was applying for HFFI or the healthy food financing, they don't include those in their projections because you cannot double count. So there's some nice examples of how they interact in that FAQ. So I would definitely go there. But they cannot be double counted. So say you make $1 million in RRP or you anticipate making $1 million in RRP, do not put that $1 million in your CDFI FA projections because that will increase your CDFI RRP projections by $1 million. And those projections, as you know, go straight into your PG&Ms.
So thank you, and I have looked at the FAQ. In a slightly different vein, let's say you anticipate, you're a CDFI that anticipates getting one of the higher award amounts. And and you want to use it, let's say, for loan loss reserve, or 50% loan loss reserve, 50% development services. So and it sounds like, again, we have a high probability of receiving an award under your approach. Then that would flow through the revenue and expenses. Should we be including it there?
You can just explain it. I think the whole point of the projections for the CDFI and NACA program evaluation is to understand the next 3 years. But as articulated in the CDFI and NACA program application evaluation process, the projections are really used to understand your FA objectives and your business plan holistically, but there are no specific benchmarks that you have to meet in your projections in order to receive an award. So really it's just trying to understand the holistic business plan of the organization.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Laura Buckstone. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Oh, thank you, and thanks for having this webinar. It's great. My CDFI, like many others, I think, had some deployment challenges in the last year, resulting in not quite reaching our PG&M benchmark for our 2019 award. You said that deployment history was going to be one of the criteria for evaluations, and I'm wondering how specifically you're looking at recent challenges that CDFIs may have had as a result of COVID-19, and that maybe, in our case, it's cured and we're on track again. But is that going to be a factor, or how are you going to be thinking about that?
Yeah, specifically, what's talked about in the deployment is that that 150% of your most recent fiscal year end close. So when's your fiscal year?
9/30.
9/30. So will you have an audit?
Yeah.
And
sure.
So we have a handy chart. It's table 13 in the NOFA. So in the CDFI program NOFA. I don't know which chart it is in the RRP NOFA, but that will tell you which year is your most recent historic year end.
Well, I know what it is, 20. So
okay. So we will. It's in the table 13 in the guidance documents, not the NOFA.
Yeah.
Thank you, team, for holding me accountable. And so we are using fiscal year 20, and that is the 150% threshold.
Okay, so when you talk about deployment history, you're just talking about deployment history of your financial products in general, not how you've performed specifically vis-a-vis CDFI awards. If you've had a challenge recently with reaching issues,
if you've had non-compliance issues that have been cured, or if there's been any compliance issues, we take that into a holistic account as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Anna.
Yeah, that's a holistic evaluation that we use based on your answers to the compliance questions, narrative drop-down, and feedback that we get from CCME, or the compliance unit.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Susan Murray. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I actually have two questions. Talking about fiscal year end, I read in the NOFA that the awards are anticipated to be announced prior to 9/30 of this year. Talking about the performance period, if my year end is 9/30 and the awards are announced, say 9/25, would I only have the 2-year period to perform, or would I get the 3rd year?
You would have a 2-year period.
Okay. Next question. This might have already been covered, but if my organization received an FA award last year, late in 2020, we haven't advanced on that yet, would that make us ineligible for applying for this RRP?
No.
Thank you. And last one, where is the FAQ document that several people have referenced?
If you go to our website, actually you can just go to cdfifund.gov/RRP. That'll take you to the page that is our repository for all of the application-related materials, and it's going to be one of the 9 documents listed on that page.
Terrific. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Zalika Johnson. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Hi, good afternoon. First, I would like to thank everyone for really putting this together. I did have a question mostly for the registration part. I know that's like really introductory. But after so we have a parent company and a subsidiary company. I know we cannot apply we cannot use both entities to apply for the grant opportunity. So we're using the subsidiary to apply. We've completed our process. Let me pause you right there.
Let me just clarify one point.
Okay.
A parent and subsidiary can both apply if they are separate organizations, like they both have 2 CDFI ID numbers, certification numbers, if they have 2 different DUNS numbers. But unless you're a depository holding company institution. If you're a depository holding company, then the holding company or the subsidiary can apply. But just to be really clear about that, but you have to be a certified CDFI. That's the real crux of the issue. So I'll continue there. I just want to make sure that I got that kind of out of the way.
No, thank you so much. So the holding company and subsidiary are both CDFI certified.
And it's a bank or is it a loan fund?
A bank. It's a bank.
Okay, great. So gotcha. I'm with you now. Both certified, depository, holding company, and the bank subsidiary. Great.
Yes, great. So the subsidiary completed the grants.gov site. So to complete our process, do we go back to AMIS and start the SF424 process with the RRP, or?
The SF424 is submitted via grants.gov, so an organization that's got their grants.gov account successfully set up will look up the opportunity number, the CDFI-2021-RRP, complete the SF424 that is associated with that number, and then submit it via grants.gov. You'll get a basically confirmation if it's done successfully via email from grants.gov that it's been accepted, and then you will log into your organization's AMIS account. You'll launch the RRP application in your organization's AMIS account, and then there'll be a process or a subsection of that application in which you associate your application with that SF424. So our system, AMIS, will, assuming you've done everything correctly, the EIN and the DUNS number match, will basically associate that record, that SF424, with your account. And then in the process of completing your application, there'll be a little form where you associate that SF424 with your application in AMIS.
Okay. And how long does it usually take for the SF424 application to be processed if we completed everything and submitted it?
This is Elizabeth. The SF424 in grants.gov can take a couple days. So we encourage folks to go, if you have not done your SF424 mandatory within grants.gov, you can go ahead and do that at the conclusion of this call. Within the RRP application guidance, there's a section, the SF424 is pretty basic. It asks you for, your organization name and your federal identifiers and your address, the program, and then the amount you're applying for. So you can go ahead and submit that now. It's also worth noting, actually, that if you're not positive yet how much you want to apply for, that's okay. The amount that you put into SF424 for your request amount is sort of a placeholder. If it winds up being different than what is your request in AMIS, we will use the AMIS amount. So you should have all of the information that you need today to go ahead and submit that SF424 as soon as possible to make sure there's processing time on their system.
Thank you. Much appreciated. That's it.
Thank you.
Your next question comes from Becca Seidel. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So my question goes back to previous conversation around affiliates and subsidiaries, again, with the statement that awards may not be used to support the activities of or otherwise be passed through, transferred to, or co-awarded to them. So looking at that, and then also looking at the eligibility tables, Table 3, I believe it is, in the NOFA. Under the Development Services section, it states that grant funds can be expended for activities undertaken by a CDFI, its affiliate, or contractor that promote community development. And so I'm wondering if you can provide some additional clarity around that pass on to the affiliates. Perhaps some context might be helpful. We are an affordable housing intermediary, and we work to fund and resource affiliate offices throughout the state who do the actual development work. And so we were hoping this fund would be able to be passed through to those offices that we resource.
Hi, this is Amber. So development services is its own category, as you noted, and you can spend grant funds for elements that fall under that category. So it is really this kind of the intention to prepare, assist, provide credit counseling and things like that. So the time that that someone spends providing that credit counseling services is an example of that, or home ownership counseling. And you can pay others for that activity, but that is something specific for development services.
Gotcha. So we could, in that specific context, we could pass funds through to the affiliate.
We aren't considering it passing through. You're paying them for a service.
You're paying them for the service. So
you're paying them for a service of development services. You are not passing through the money to them to satisfy the goals of the RRP.
Okay, wonderful. I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding that difference correctly so that we could still use the funds for that purpose. Okay, that makes sense. And then connected to that question under the development services, is there a specific time period that those development services need to take place within? Is it, essentially wondering if there's still outstanding invoices or things, either prior to the posting of the NOFA or prior to, when the award is actually given? Can we cover those expenses, or does it have to be from the date of the award and forward?
It has to be from the date of the award to the closing of the period of performance.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Emma Q. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Hi. Thanks again for this presentation. Just a question on award sizing. Given that you are looking to the most recently closed fiscal year and the number of financial products closed within that to, gauge the requested amount for organizations that have a 6/30 fiscal year end that may have seen, a reduction in the amount of financial products closed during that fiscal year. Is that the only consideration for award sizing, or is there a place in the application where you take into account financial products closed after the most recent fiscal year?
Yeah, this is a formula-based approach. And in order to design and implement a program in 60 days in the federal government, we had to take a very streamlined approach. The goal is to get the money to get all the applications in, evaluated, and get it announced quickly. So the formula is going to be a little bit more cut and dry based on what information we've put into the NOFA, including your most recently completed historic year is going to be that baseline.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Sandra Burke. Your line is open.
Hello, thank you, and thank you for the webinar today. I want to circle back to the question of audits and audited statements. I'm with a CDFI that is a loan program that does loans for microenterprise, and in the past we have not had enough size of government grants and government funding to be required to do an official audit. Now we do an external review with an accounting firm, and they do a report over our statements and things, but it is not quite an official audit. So we have the reports, we have the statements, it is an external review, but it is not an official audit. So does that mean that we are limited then, from what I heard today, to the minimum $200,000 award since we do not have an official audit statements?
I'm going to go, I want to reread the NOFA very carefully, but yes is my first answer. Okay. We're not talking about A133 audit. That is, anybody who has to do who has expended over $750,000 in federal awards in a single year. Yeah. That's an A133 audit. CDFIs can get audit outside of the A133. We're not asking for A133. We're only asking for audited financial statements. We need not reviewed.
Oh, okay. So you're not talking about the A133, which we have not had to do because we haven't had.
We are not talking about an A133. We're talking about a audited review where there's an opinion letter, there's a qualification. All of those things.
Okay. Well, our external review would cover those kinds of things because there is an opinion, there is a report, et cetera. Okay. Well, that helps. Thank you very much. And I've enjoyed the webinar. It's been very helpful. So thank you. That, I think, is all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Tom Manning. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Hi. Thank you. I see in the NOFA it says that we can use the funds in eligible investment areas or our target market. Emphasis on the or. So that means, if I understand it, that we could use 100% of the RRP funds outside of our approved target market, so long as it's in CDFI eligible census tracts?
That's correct. What you do need to keep in mind, though, is that you'll still be required to meet that 60% threshold of activity in your target market in order to maintain your organization CDFI certification. So long as an organization can continue to meet that 60% threshold in order to maintain certification, theoretically an organization could use the full amount of the award in an eligible market and not their approved target market.
I see. So, and remind me, the 60% is measured on a fiscal year basis, each fiscal year, or?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's done through your annual certification report.
Right.
For the ACR. Yeah.
Okay. And for those that get a minimum award, $200,000, could it theoretically entirely be used for operating costs?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Benjamin Allen. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I enjoyed the call. My question is, does the AMIS system have a technical requirement that the organization submit the SF424 before having access to view the RRP application? Because we were trying to review the financial data requirements within the system, we could not view them. or could there be another issue not allowing us to open the RRP application within AMOS?
You were a little bit, you came on strong there at the end, but the first 25–50% of your comment, your question, was very, very quiet. We couldn't hear you, so could you?
Yeah, I can repeat myself and maybe a little bit louder will help. Is that okay?
Yep, we hear you good now.
Okay. Does the AMOS system have a technical requirement that the organization submit the SF 424 before having access to view the RRP application? Because we were trying to review the financial data requirements within the system and could not view them, or could there be another issue not allowing us to open the RRP application within AMOS?
No, you're not required to submit the SF 424 before launching the application. What would be really helpful for us, do you know how to submit a service request?
Yes, I do.
If you submit a service request under your organization's account, we can follow up with specific guidance and look into the issue that may be preventing you from launching an application, but it wouldn't be the SF 424. And when you submit that service request, we do have a new option, a new feature in the drop-down menu. Please select CDFI RRP, and that way it'll get routed to us and we can answer most quickly and get you some help and hopefully get that application launched.
I'd also like to give a plug. We have the fiscal year 21 CDFI Rapid Response Program AMOS application training manual that has lots of beautiful pictures and helpful tips on how to troubleshoot any part of the program. It is, over 50 pages long, so that can also be a really good source for anybody working at this at night or, during the day if you're on the, East Coast, West Coast time. So definitely go to the AMOS training manual can help as well.
Again, thank you very much.
Number 8 on the website.
Yep.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Shanti. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for the information. And I'm sorry if this question has already been asked. I just wanted to make doubly sure. If we have a fiscal year of December 31st, we don't need audited statements for 2020. Our history of direct years will be 17, 18, 19. We do have those audited statements. We just need interim statements for 2020. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Wonderful. And then I've got another quick question. My understanding is that there are a certain number of eligible activities, and there are a number that 50% of the lending has to be completed by the end of year 1. And that other sources of funds, as long as it's in your target market, can be used to meet that amount, that percentage. But are you able to move amounts amongst categories, amongst the eligible activities? So if you have an initial projection of how you're going to, utilize those funds in the eligible categories, are you able to move those amounts around? Does that make sense, my question?
Yeah, so we are not asking for your budget is just the amount of your request. And we are pre-authorizing you to use the money in any way you see fit, as long as they're within those eligible activities. And then during the reporting periods, you fill out a report called the Uses of Award Report, and you tell us exactly how you spent those funds within the eligible categories. So it's basically a look back. It's like an allowance. You get your allowance, and mom and dad say you can spend it on, books and candy, and you tell them, I spent this much on this and this much on that.
So basically, you wouldn't really truly know your lending amount then when you receive the award, but it sounds like you should really know it by the end of the year. You should really nail it down by the end of the year or during the year because you have to meet that 50% requirement if you're not using other funds. Just go ahead, sorry.
That's totally separate. So using the award money, the actual dollars that you get, that's the PG&M 1 where you put into the eligible categories. Hard stop. PG&M 2 is your deployment goals, right, or your lending goals. And those you count on all the closed loans and all the closed loan guarantees and all the closed equity investments that you would report in your transaction level report from your organization. So that's a balance sheet, right? Like that's everything that you've closed holistically as an organization. It doesn't matter where the money came from. And then what we'll do is, as long as it's 50% and you don't have, another CDFI award, to keep it really simple, you got $1 million award, you're required to close $500,000 in the first period of performance. So from the date of award announcement through one full fiscal year, you would have had to close $500,000 in financial products anywhere from any money. Is that more helpful?
That is completely helpful as long as it's in your target market or eligible market. That's really clear. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Rosalie Garrick. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
I just need a little clarity on the performance goals. We actually have a CDFI grant that we are performing currently. So we have performance goals for 2022. So if we were to receive the RFP grant and we had performance goals, we'd have to add that. We would have two different performance goals. In other words, by meeting the performance goals of our prior grant, that doesn't automatically meet the goal of this RRP grant. Is that true?
That's correct. You cannot report a financial product closed for both awards. So if you make a loan, loan X for $500,000, you have to make the choice to either report that to satisfy your CDFI program award or your CDFI RRP award, not both.
Okay, and thank you. And then the second question is, if we fail to meet one of the performance goals, which would be probably the lending goal of 70% by the end of the performance period, what is the penalty related to not meeting that goal?
So I don't think we're going to be able to provide like a very specific answer on how that would affect an individual organization. Our compliance team has an evaluation process that they go through anytime an organization fails to meet a PG&M. And so depending on an organization's history and the severity of the goal and an organization's plan or capability to meet the goal in the future would kind of depend on the sanction or perhaps not a sanction at all occurring, just kind of a lower level of noncompliance. So it is something that would be considered and taken into effect by our compliance team, but without knowing more about an organization and kind of understanding their compliance history more holistically, it's not something that we could probably give you a definitive answer to now, but it is something that would be taken into effect and considered by our compliance staff.
So if we always, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, please.
So if we've always met our compliance requirements in the past, and on this one it says 70% by the end of year 2, and we only made it to 50% at the end of year 2, could we, to some extent, assume that it would not be a severe penalty?
We can't say that. Everybody on this team is a program staff member. CDFI compliance team has their own policies and procedures, and they follow those to make sure that everybody is treated equitably. But they do have, as I referenced, like this for us is a very hard formula. My understanding is it's a holistic compliance tool.
And
okay.
one more thing, not directly related to compliance, but if an organization does, let's say they can request, $2 million, but they're not sure that they'll be able to meet those deployment goals, we're not requiring organizations to request the full amount they're eligible for. So we're not going to give specific guidance to an organization about the amount that they are required or should apply for, but that is something to consider as you go through the process of applying for RRP. Can I meet the PG&Ms and how they would be calculated based on the amount of the award I receive?
Right. So we should work towards requesting the amount that we believe that we could meet those progress goals, performance goals.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you so much.
One thing that I did want to bring up is I've talked a lot about this report, the transaction level report. We did design the RRP and CDFI and NACA program to work together. So if you have a current CDFI program award or you receive a current award in this round, you only have to submit one TLR report. You aren't submitting multiple TLR reports. So you do have to submit, multiple performance progress reports because they're asking specifically about PG&Ms on each one of these units, but and the uses of a board. But the TLR, which I know is a really heavy lift, you only have to do one of. So we tried to understand the interactions between the two programs as far as burden.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Felicia Pearson. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Thank you. We are a real estate lending CDFI, and what happens is at closing, we may or may not fully fund that particular loan. So with regards to the term financial products closed, does that mean that the loan has to be closed or closed and funded to count?
Just closed. So it's what you would, again, report on the TLR. So when you close that loan, it's $1 million, that clearly the drawdown is going to be over the period. It's the amount you've committed to, even if it's a dry close.
Okay, so that will differ from what's on the balance sheet.
Correct.
Okay.
But that's what you would report in the TLR. Is you would report that loan closed in, March. You wouldn't report on subsequent disbursements on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Alice Veenstra. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Hi. Thank you so much for doing all of this. Quick question. I think just double checking, dotting I's, crossing T's. An organization that does not have financial activity 3 years ago, so if they have a 12/31 fiscal year end, they don't have any 2017 activity, they would then only have to submit 2 years of financial audits, right?
Correct. And you just report, but you still have to fill out the 3 years of data, so you would have to put in zeros.
Yep, got it. Thought that was the case. Just double checking. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Maria. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Hi. I was just wondering if you anticipate any changes to the fields, the reporting fields in the TLR, or if you expect that it will remain exactly the same as it is for
We do not anticipate making any significant changes to the TLR. There might be some additional drop downs to allow you to identify a loan specifically to RRP, right, like we do for HFI or DFFA or PPCFA. That will help with, tagging and compliance. But we are still finalizing everything, but we have definitely making sure we're trying to ensure that we aren't increasing significant burden on the CDFI in their reporting requirements.
Great. Thanks so much.
But just
to make sure, I'm not committing, but I'm saying that we're thinking through it. This is recorded for posterity.
Yes, got it. Okay. Not in stone.
Thank you. And at this time, I'm showing no further questions.
Okay, let's go ahead and give it another minute or two. We're a little bit past the 4 o'clock hour when we were scheduled to end the call. But because this is a new program and there's so much interest, we are committed to answering as many questions as you all have. I said this at the top of the call, but if you do have a question that you submitted through the chat box, the Q&A, it would be nice if you could go ahead and queue up on the phones and ask that question. It's a little bit easier for us. If we didn't get to your question and you don't have an answer, you can always go ahead and submit a service request to us via your organization's AMIS account. So either way, we want to make sure that we answer all your questions and get you in a good spot to apply for RRP.
And again, just press *1 on the phone lines to ask a question. Our next question comes from Eva St. John. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Yes. I have a client that's interested in using the funds partially for mortgage assistance or to help with pay property taxes. Would they design that product as a forgivable loan? Would that go under loans, or would that be considered an equity investment?
You have to look at the definition of financial product, but forgivable loans are an eligible financial product for the RRP application.
Forgivable loan would be considered a loan, not an equity investment.
If it is an equity investment, it meets the definition of an equity investment, like dividends and so on and so forth, then, it's reported as equity. But if it's structured as a forgivable loan, that's also an eligible use of loans. And you would report that on the TLR, just like, if a CDFI was doing a lot of PPP lending, you close the you would close and report the PPP lending on your TLR, and it would also count towards meeting your PG&M.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Next question comes from Christine Lias. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for having this webinar. It is helpful. There's a lot of information. Clint, I have a question for you. At the very beginning of the webinar, when you were going over the application in AMIS and the financial data section, you went over it a little quickly, the 3 fields in particular that we need to pay attention to. Could you go over that again, please? I said again twice.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see if I'm still logged in. Okay, great. Now, every organization does need to fill out, every section of the application financial data accurately and consistently. So, all fields are important for your 3 years of historic data and your current year of financial data. However, for purposes of calculating an organization's maximum award request, there are 3 fields that go into that calculation. That's in the historic year. The maximum amount an organization will be able to request will be calculated based upon the total financial products closed in an eligible market or target market in the historic year. And that's calculated by adding up your on-balance sheet loans closed in an eligible market and or target market. So this field right here. Your organization's on-balance sheet loan guarantees made in an eligible market and or target market. And then finally, your organization's total equity investments closed in an eligible market and or target market.
Great. Thank you so much.
This is Elizabeth jumping in. On our website, I also wanted to highlight we have a workbook, an Excel workbook called the Application Financial Data Workbook. It is a tool. It is not something you would submit with the application, but it is in Excel for reference. It's resource number 5, and it lists all of the fields that you would have to put into your application. financial data, so it can be a nice place to kind of work on those numbers ahead of time. I know there's a lot of fields and you can't really see them all on screen at the same time. And in the one for the RRP, we've gone ahead and highlighted those 3 rows that Clint mentioned, so it will be very easy to find which 3 rows you need for reference.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Larry Griffin. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the seminar. I guess my question, while we were on the seminar, I opened up an app, but now I can't get back in it. Is there some pointers that you can give to me on the phone, or should I just wait for a service person to respond?
If you can navigate, we can follow up with the specifics of your organization if there's still issues. But once you navigate to your organization's program profile for CDFI NACA, it should look like this. And then you would come down here and click on this number next to your Rapid Response Program application, and it should open up the application. If you're able to do that and click that link and you can't access the application, please go ahead and submit that service request. It sounds like you may have already done that, and we'll follow up and troubleshoot and give you any assistance necessary. And like Amber also gave a plug to, you can also check out this application training manual on the RRP website in the meantime. Maybe able to give you some assistance on how to find that application again.
Okay.
The other point that I just want to clarify is on that program profile page, you click the numbers, you don't click the name. If you click the name, it will come up with an error message, or it will just show you like a couple of words. So you got to click the app number.
Okay, I think I did that, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Ellen Liang. Your line is open. You may ask your question.
Hi there. I just wanted to double check whether or not we can serve the same populations that we intend to serve in our SA application.
You can serve any population that is considered an eligible market and or in your approved target market. So, when we talk about eligible markets, just so everybody knows, those are pre-approved investment areas that are census tracts that have high poverty or high unemployment, things like that. And then also other targeted populations such as anyone who's low income, African American, Native American, Alaska Native, Hispanic, Native Hawaiian, so on and so forth.
Okay, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. And at this time, I'm showing no further questions.
Okay, well, great. I think with that, we'll wrap this portion of the webinar up, the Q&A. I do want to give everyone that's still on the webinar or on the phone call a reminder that we do have another webinar scheduled for next week on the 10th, so a week from today at the same time, using the same dial-in information. That webinar will be a little bit different. We'll have a much shorter, much more abbreviated formal presentation up front, and then reserve the majority of the call for the question and answer session. So over the course of the next week, I would really encourage everyone, if they're interested in applying for RRP, to go ahead and get that SF424 submitted. Remember, the deadline is the 22nd of March. And then create your RRP application in AMOS. You don't have to fill it all out right now, but it may give you some questions that you'd like us to clarify next week. It'd be a great way to get familiar with the application and then have a leg up on getting it submitted, hopefully in advance of that March 25th deadline for the final application submission. So again, thanks everyone so much for joining and for the tremendous level of interest in the RRP. We look forward to seeing your application.
Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. This does conclude today's conference. We thank you for your participation. At this time, you may disconnect your lines.